Hey folks, Ms. Gosling here. In this video, you are going to be introduced to the energy sources that we cover in our energy sources unit. By the end of the video, you will be able to categorize different energy sources. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So pictured here are the main energy sources that we'll be discussing in this class. First, we have our fossil fuels, pictured here as coal, oil, and natural gas. Below that, we have nuclear power. We also have wind turbines, a solar panel, and finally a hydroelectric dam. These energy sources are how almost all of the energy that we use in our day-to-day lives are created. So in this unit, we're going to be investigating and digging deep into these 5 key energy sources. We'll be looking at their pros and cons. We'll be looking at how we can calculate the energy generated in different power plants and in different energy generators. Um, and at the end of this, you'll be having to analyze the pros, cons, costs, benefits of our different energy sources in a real world scenario. So let's go ahead and talk about how we categorize these energy sources. So one way of categorizing energy sources is as primary or secondary. Primary energy sources are energy sources that don't need to be processed. So unprocessed energy sources are primary sources. When we process that energy, we generate a secondary energy source. Now, the energy sources that we discussed or that we talked about on the previous slide are primary energy sources. So coal, oil, natural gas, wind, water, nuclear power, reactions, and finally, of course, sunlight are all primary sources of energy. The power plants that we generate, so our thermal power plants that we use to generate power from our fossil fuels and from nuclear energy, our hydroelectric dams, our wind turbines, and our solar panels are all used to process different primary energy sources into the kind of most common secondary energy source that we see, which is, of course, electricity. We generally will turn all of these primary energy sources into electricity because electricity is easy to transport, much easier, for example, to build a power line than it is to build a bunch of train tracks to transport raw coal around. Electricity is, of course, also a lot more flexible. So we can use coal, we can burn coal to create heat and light, but we could not really use that heat and light very easily to, for example, run an AC unit. So that was our first way of categorizing energy. A second way of categorizing energy is as renewable or non-renewable. Renewable energy sources are constantly being replaced. That is, they're things that we don't have to worry about running out of. For example, the sun is going to be continuing to burn and therefore continuing to send sunlight to the earth at a constant rate, regardless of how much of that energy we are or are not converting via solar power. Similarly, rivers will continue to flow and the wind will continue to blow. Non-renewable energy sources, on the other hand, are energy sources that either cannot be replaced or cannot be replaced in a reasonable amount of time. For example, were we to want to create more coal, we would have to wait millions of years for fossils to turn into coal. Similarly, with our oil and our natural gas. Uranium is even less renewable in that we have essentially a finite amount of uranium on this planet. While we could have some less stable elements decay into uranium, it does not happen at anywhere near the replacement rate. So we're using it a lot more quickly than it's being generated. So for our non-renewable sources, we do have to worry about running out of those one day if we continue to use them at a faster rate than they're being replaced. So some takeaways. The energy sources we'll be discussing in this unit are fossil fuels, nuclear power, hydroelectric power, wind turbines, and solar panels. Primary energy sources are sources that are not transformed before consumption, while secondary energy sources are sources that result from the transformation of primary energy sources. And finally, renewable energy sources are those that will be replenished quickly, while non-renewables are those that cannot be replenished quickly. And so those are our key energy sources and a little bit of a discussion of how we categorize them. So with that, it's time to learn a little bit more about some of the other differences between our energy sources by examining efficiency and Sankey diagrams. So best of luck and happy learning.